RENEE Pickles, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs all the way from Sydney, Australia. You are a mathematics teacher in Sydney and also co-creator of JWs Support, an online resource for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, a group you grew up in and which you left at age 21. You've been a featured guest on numerous podcasts, as well as on the recent Four Corners documentary, Bearing Witness, and continue to speak out and raise awareness about a religious group that you now consider to be a coercive cult. So how are you doing, RENEE? The Bearing Witness documentary was one of the most hard-hitting exposés of the witnesses that I've seen. So what has the response been like since the airing of that show?
So, Mark, it actually has been fantastic because in Australia, Four Corners has been around for 60 years and it's one of the most trusted investigative journalist group around. And so what they did is they were very careful in researching and making sure that they were, as fair as possible in reporting, and they did a really good job. They are trusted so much that they've often led to further investigation. So, for example, they're the ones that are regarded as responsible for initiating the investigations and commencing of the Australian Royal Commission, which was investigating institutional response to child abuse. So, yeah, they really are trusted, and it was fantastic to have them to approach us because we knew it wasn't going to be like a sensationalist report. It was the best group, really, to do the job.
Okay, let's get into your story. You were brought up a Jehovah's Witness, and although your dad was never part of the group, your mom had been a JW long before your birth. Isn't that right?
Sure thing. So I was born into it. And then I had 3 older brothers, and Mum had already been a witness for about 10 years. My dad was never a part of it. He was actually quite against it. And so, the things became quite violent in the end. But yes, that's basically my story.
Well, before we go any deeper, can you just give us an overview of the Jehovah's Witnesses and their beliefs? What makes them different from other Bible-believing groups?
Okay, so I probably would describe them as, to me, they're like an evangelical group, but with a twist. They have, I think, extremely coercive practices that really want to control your lifestyle, your behavior, your thoughts. The biggest coercive practice they have is shunning. So obviously that's a technique that's used to really maintain control over people and their behavior and trying to keep them in the group. And I think that's the strongest practice that they have over other evangelical groups, although I won't dispute that other groups do it as well. But it seems to be a main tenet, in my opinion, that really keeps control. They have really strong opinions about Armageddon being extremely imminent, that Armageddon is around the corner, and it's used as a real fear-mongering technique to keep the group under control. And it's repeated often that it's around the corner, it's coming, you really must stay close. And I think that's a really strong tool that they're using to keep the group really tight-knit. And also words such as, at any point you need to follow our instructions, even though you might not understand, because we're trying to guide you through this difficult period that is going to lead to Armageddon. So altogether, it's a very, it seems, when you're in it, it seems like it's totally safe and lovely and normal. But once you step away and once you really analyze what's going on, you can see that it's actually quite a dangerous group that's really controlling people and manipulating their entire life.
Yeah, and I think you said that other groups do shun, like the Mormons a little bit, I think, but it really is something else in the Jehovah's Witnesses, isn't it?
Look, it's discussed frequently. It's detailed. Things like articles come out where you're not allowed to email. Like, they get into specifics because some families might try, well, I'm not going to talk to my child, but I might text them or ring them. And so they've done really specific things, such as even texting or any slight form of effort at communication shows that you're not really trusting Jehovah, God, as the person in charge. So, and also the Elders Manual, which is not seen by the majority of the witnesses, does actually state that if you do have connections with a disfellowshipped person, a shunned person, you're at risk of being shunned yourself. So it is not an ideal situation to be in. There's threats all the way through.
RENEE, what was life like for you as a full-time witness? Because there was a stage in your life when you were really into it, isn't that right?
Yeah, so our family, yeah, we were really into it. Like my mum eventually was able to encourage us to do as much as we could, to volunteer as much as we could. And my family had three pioneers, which I can explain later if you want me to. They all became elders. They most of them ended up serving at the headquarters, volunteering for free, where they print all the publishing material, which is now changed, obviously, because there's less books, but it's still the same concept. So our family was extremely devout, and we attended meetings. So my schedule would include attending meetings. We never missed a meeting. We were always preparing and studying, and we had to set example by contributing to the meetings and answering and doing parts. So as far as I was concerned, I was like such a good witness. Our family was so good because we were ticking every box, and and in a way, and I'm going to be honest, we looked down on others and say, well, why weren't they trying as hard as us? We were if you looked at me from externally, basically I was a fanatic. But to me, I felt as if I had a direct ticket to heaven. I was so close to Jehovah. I would talk to him as if he was right there, as he was my best friend. I would have conversations in my head with him constantly. I was preaching to the kids at school to make sure that they would be saved, because I knew that Armageddon was coming and they would die. I was in this bubble, this fantasy bubble, and I honestly believed that Armageddon was around the corner. I was going to survive and it was going to be fantastic. And I just needed to work really hard along with my family. And we were pretty set. We were pretty confident that unless we made mistakes, we were pretty set that we would get a ticket there and do all right. And in actual fact, I remember going from door to door and this is what we did. We looked at the houses that we were going to inherit. I would look around and go, I love that one. That one could be mine. And that's what we did, honestly.
So when everyone was destroyed, you could just pick all the poshest houses and just keep them. Is that right?
Yeah, basically we fantasized that, well, the articles and the way they depict the pictures is that Jehovah would destroy all the churches and all the government and Satan's world, which is all the government and the United Nations and NATO and all these government religious things, but he would leave the good stuff for us. And so that's how I rationalized in my mind, because in the articles you never seem to see a house that was destroyed. So I would look at the houses and think, which one would I pick?
Well, things started to change when your mother, brother, and you left your home in Italy and escaped to Holland. So tell us about that.
Well, Mark, as I explained to you, my father was never a believer, and I think he tried for many years to talk my mum out of it. And in the end, he became actually quite violent. He wasn't a balanced individual himself anyway, so there's no excuse to use violence, but he did resort to violence, and it just got worse and worse. As a side note, the Jehovah's Witnesses used coercion to talk my mum into staying. They said, basically, you're not allowed to leave because he's your husband and you owe him. And in fact, you need to try harder to stay with him. They even asked, are you meeting his sexual needs? Are you cooking him meals? Because your behavior is going to influence him and turn him around. So my mum honestly believed this. So she stayed with him for so many years. And in the end, it became so violent that one night it came to a head. And from my eyes, and I remember this very vividly, that I would say my mum's life was in danger as well as my brother's. So that night we managed to escape, my brother and I, through a window, the kitchen window. We were able to jump out and race to the car. Mum somehow got away. We did run away, and within a few months we hid for a long time, because obviously within the community we needed to not let him know where we were. And then she organised passports and got an overnight train from Italy into Holland, and then from Holland to Australia. And so then we landed in Australia, and from then on, to me, because I was a devout witness, I honestly felt that a lot of freedoms came because we didn't have a really aggressive father. Mum and us could really get into serving Jehovah even more and do as much as we could.
Although being a devout witness, you experienced doubts on more than one occasion. So what were the things you were feeling during those teenage years?
When I arrived in Australia, I was, like I said, we were a really strong family, devout family to the Jehovah's Witnesses, but something inside wasn't feeling right in me. I would put it down to probably post-traumatic stress disorder, to be honest. Having dealt with escaping a country, witnessing a very violent, situation at home, and being in a cult which repressed your freedom and creativity. So I think when I got to Australia, I started doing things that were quite risky. I know I wasn't right because I know I became anorexic. I had huge difficulties at school, integrating at school. I did become suicidal in the end, and we can talk about that if you want to later. But something wasn't feeling right, and I was trying everything, and nobody was able to help me because Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in getting help outside. So I was displaying, to me, if I saw that today, I'd go, this kid needs help. They need psychiatric help. They're in a mess. So I was so lost, and so I started pushing boundaries with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I started, when I got my license at 17, racing my car against extreme speeds, almost as if I was trying to hurt myself. I would, start behaving in risky situations, which I wasn't allowed to, by being overly friendly with the opposite sex at work, knowing full well that I wasn't allowed to, flirting. So I was pushing those boundaries, and by the time I was 21, I did contemplate suicide. So I was just not in a good place, and together with that, I felt this constant situation of sickness because I felt like I was displeasing Jehovah. So I was close to God, and I had been talking to him, and he was really close to me. So I'd started feeling like like he was watching me and every single thing I was doing, and I was in a complete state of trauma, worrying about how he was thinking about all the actions I was doing. And I knew I was in trouble. I was picturing missing out, not making it through Armageddon, getting destroyed, just horrible stuff. Trauma I did not need on top of the trauma that I had, that I needed help with. And my mum, look, in her limited understanding within the religion, she tried to seek me help with other elders. But these guys had no idea. The only advice they could give was from their limited ideas of what would help, which is usually more praying, more relying on Jehovah. Stop thinking about the bad things. Stop doing the bad things you're doing.
And were these all males as well?
They're all males. Absolutely.
Course,
Look. To be honest, the wives were there. So let's be honest. Let's be fair. But no, the majority of the leadership is from the men. And so when I was spoken to seriously, I was spoken to one-on-one by the men. It was just the most distressing period of my life. It was horrible because I was in so much internal conflict while trying to deal with all the trauma I'd been through, and there really was no help. And I was not permitted, I'm going to repeat that, as a Jehovah's Witness, you're not to trust outside people. So I would never confide in a teacher or a counselor at school, because you just knew that they were part of Satan's world. So they were not accessible to me as well. So it was an absolute, what do they call, a cauldron of just a horrible, horrible situation to be placed in. And had I not been a witness, I think I would have been able to get more help. And that's why a lot of my anger stems from my childhood being so damaged by this religion, because they really do shut off access to assistance. And I think that's what drives most of my activism is they really do close your access to help. And it's so insular. This group is so insular, and they don't have the answers internally. But they say they do, but those answers are dangerous. They're not helpful. They lead to a more complicated situation where your behavior is controlled even further. It's an absolute disaster.
All this led to your disfellowshipping, effectively kicking you out of the congregation. So what was that experience like for you, and what was life like after being disfellowshipped?
This would be one of the most traumatic parts of my life. Apart from the others, this would be probably the pinnacle. So I was 21. I had been involved in this risky behavior, which, by the way, in today's terms would be it's just what kids do. There was nothing, it's just ridiculous. And so I knew that I had been involved in this risky behavior, but it was minor in my mind. And so I still self-reported, though, because I was in that constant state of, I don't want to miss out on Armageddon. And the rules are that if you want to survive Armageddon, you have to self-report. So I went to the elders and said, look, this is what I've been up to. I've been doing this and this and this. And they gave me a warning, and they said, don't do it again. But there was no real assistance. Again, there was nothing that would help me. As I said, I think I was dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder from all the horrible stuff I'd been through as a kid, the control I was feeling. So there was no assistance. And again, I self-reported, look, I'm still doing this, this, and this. And right, they said, this is enough. We're going to have to set up a judicial committee because you're risking the congregation. Your unclean behavior could be affecting others. And so we're going to have to put you in a judicial committee. Now, if you don't know what a judicial committee is, I want you to think interrogation. I want you to think like those dark rooms, where you see on television where you're asked questions. Like, there was no physical, obviously, coercion. However, the questions that were asked were extremely private. They were probing. They were totally inappropriate. In actual fact, if it was recorded, you could present it, and I think it would be classified as assault because 3 men ask a repeated number of questions in such detail that it's abuse. It's definitely abuse, and it's inappropriate, and definitely to a young lady on her own. I was not allowed to bring in support. The rules at that time, and I still think they're like that, is that you're not allowed to bring in a support person. So I was on my own, and it was over a series of 3, I'm going to call them interrogation sessions. And then by the end of those 3 interrogation sessions, I was deemed that I wasn't repentant enough, that I was flaunting the rules, that I was pushing the boundaries too much, that I was a danger to other young people. And so they decided that they were going to announce me in front of the whole congregation that I was no longer a Jehovah's Witness. And this is absolutely devastating. It was devastating for me, but it was devastating for my mum, because basically disfellowshipping is pretty much like an instant death. It's like you are cut off from your family, your friends. So, for example, my best friend, which I think about to this day, after that announcement, I didn't even get to say goodbye to her. From that night onwards, where they said, we are going to announce you, I did not get an opportunity to say goodbye to her. From that moment onwards, they are not allowed to contact me. They're not allowed to talk to me. And so I was instantly cut off from all my connections. And this was really something that I think really helped me to, and do you know what? I'm so grateful that happened. As cataclysmic and as horrible and as traumatizing that was, and I do not wish it on anybody, I think that was the best thing that happened to me, because it was the beginning of saving me, because I was asked to leave home after a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And I basically realized that I don't think that God's backing was with these people, with these 3 people, especially in the judicial committee, because these elders had decided that I was unsavable. And I was still, remember, I was talking to Jehovah and apologizing and feeling really bad, and I still had really this connection. So I still felt Jehovah was really real, and I was apologizing to him. And I was trying my best to do the right thing. I knew in my heart that I honestly felt this was his organization and I wanted to support it. But they had decided that I wasn't good enough, and that not only wasn't I good enough, but that I was not worthy to be in God's organization anymore. So I totally disagreed with it, because internally I knew I still wanted to be with God and do the right thing. So it was fantastic. Look, the when I got disfellowshipped, it helped me to start, the process of critically thinking what was behind all this really.
Set you free.
Set me free. Set me free, for sure. Best thing that happened. I know it's horrible, but no, let me say it's not the best thing that happened, because it shouldn't have happened in the first place. I should have been a free-willed, spirited individual, and I'm a very creative person, and I missed out on a lot, and all this stuff shouldn't have happened. So when I say it's the best thing that happened, I'm saying within that circumstance, it was my get out of jail card.
Well, you're in a much better place today and are an occasional activist organizing a protest in 2019 at a JW convention and co-founding JW.support. So, thinking back on all that you went through, what has living with and then leaving the witnesses taught you?
So, Mark, I know as I was growing up and reflecting now just how much this group emotionally stunted my development. I've got my own kids at the moment, and the way I talk to them is so different to how I was spoken to. And that makes a huge difference. Instead of viewing everything from a point of view of, penance, making sure you repent and asking for forgiveness is a continual state of not feeling good enough. The way I speak to my kids is, what have you done? Have we made a mistake? Okay, what have we learned? How did that mistake start? How did it happen? Okay, how can we do this better next time? Great, you're a better person for it. What a great experience that was. And it's a totally different attitude to grow up with. And not only that, they're placed in situations that I wasn't. They see, in our group, we were given this false sense of brotherhood. So as soon as you're born in or you arrive, everybody's fantastic. Everybody's got the godlike personality. Everybody's like really kind, unnaturally so. And so what happens is you get this false sense of character development, and you never learn how to deal with conflict, for example, which a lot of former Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of trouble reintegrating into society, because they are expecting everybody to be a certain way, but people are not like that. So you don't develop this ability to develop true relationships. So that's why I'm saying your emotional, development is definitely stunted. So that's something that I've had to learn and grow with, is learn how to, interact with humans, and that's actually really distressing, and it's really tiring and exhausting, having to learn how to reintegrate into society. The other thing that's really significant is, for a long time, I was holding on to the hope of saving my family. So I would try and contact, even though I'm not allowed to. But then I thought, well, stuff it. I'm going to contact you, try and send them things to try and persuade them. But, and I spent so much energy, and I probably did that for a very much longer than what I should have. I think once I decided to surrender the need to make them wake up, because really a friend told me, and it was great advice, that is a form of control on my part, me trying to control their behavior. So what I did is, instead I said, well, the waking up process is very individual. Coming out of these, extreme coercive groups, is you can't just tell facts and they come out. For me, you could have told me facts for a long time. The thing that woke me up was very personal. It was that disfellowshipping situation, and other things along the way that were spattered here and there. So you can't force people to like. It's something that has to come and arise within them. So once I decided that, what, they're going to have to wake up on their own. That's their job. It's not my job. I was able to let go and say, I'm not responsible for them. I'm responsible for my healing, my journey, my new family, my friends, and to put all my energy into that. And that's been the best thing, that's helped me to move on. And the other thing that I've done as well, that I would really recommend people in my situation, if you're, or anybody who's been through trauma, any sort of trauma, speaking about what I've been through has been so powerful. I've done it in a book version, which I haven't released, but that's beside the point. I wrote a book. I started a Facebook site where I just told short stories about my childhood, and that really struck a chord with people in a very non-biased way. This is what happened to me. This is how I felt. Telling stories. I'm now doing TikTok. I did an Instagram page. I have spoken on podcasts, and I've done other things. Every time I tell my story, and every time you tell your story, what it does is it gets easier to retell it so that you become more fluid in the way you speak, but it solidifies in your heart how you feel. It heals all those little things that are going on, because as you tell it, it reinforces, yes, I'm doing the right thing. As you tell it, it reinforces, what I've been through is no fault of my own. It's just really unlucky. I got dealt these cards, and the only thing I can do now is work out a way to heal what I've been given, and make the best of what I've got left. And that's really, and really it is an exciting journey, because every day you will make progress and you will get better. So I do recommend that you tell your story, because if you bottle it up and you're silenced and you don't, if you don't do that, I think that's really sad, and it hurts more. And I think that's why the Jehovah's Witnesses do this. They silence you. They send you. When I was disfellowshipped, for example, I thought I was the only person out there. I thought, I've done the wrong thing, or I better get back in quickly because I'm out here on my own. But if you look out and search support groups, there's thousands. You're not on your own. So many people are leaving, and who was it that told me recently that the internet is the best disinfectant for cults? It was a fantastic comment that somebody made. So, you're going to be okay. Just keep working on yourself and tell your story and be heard, because your story is valuable. It is.
Something we were discussing earlier is how we're seeing hardly any Jehovah's Witnesses out and about since the pandemic started back in 2020. So what do you think is happening in the JW world? How has the pandemic affected this group?
Look, Mark, I think that the pandemic, internally, I know it's creating a lot of hysteria, because, every time there's an event that happens like that around the world, they get frantic in the belief that this is it, the end times are here, because it's all been building up to that. So every little thing that happens, this must be it. So I know that it's created created a state of alert within them. At the same time, though, I think having the meetings all moved to Zoom, I think, and making all people, do this thing from their own homes and their own lounge rooms, I think would have an impact, because I know what it was like when I was in the schedules of the meetings, the routines. They kept you exhausted. They kept you in a way that you didn't have time to think, basically. So I'm really hopeful that this pandemic is going to give people a chance to think. And there are reports of witnesses slowly not putting their cameras on, or not participating, or not having to be spoken about things like relaxing their dress codes. So to me, all these things show that, once they've been given a chance to break away from that repetitive propaganda, hopefully it's going to give them a bit more opportunity to think, about what's happening, and to start questioning really whether they want to go back to a lifestyle once the meetings are back, face to face. Will they want to go back to that lifestyle that is so demanding? So I'm hoping that it's going to have an impact with that, for sure.
It's great that you've been able to come out the other side of a troubled early life and are doing so well now in Australia with your family, and speaking out about your experiences on social media, such as TikTok, as well as on shows like this. I will leave links to your social media in the description below. And all that's left to say is thank you once again, Renee, for coming on to Talk Beliefs.
Mark, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. I'm really grateful that there are outlets that allow us to do this. And I hope your viewers enjoyed it. And I would encourage them to look into more about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And if they ever come across any Jehovah's Witness forums, or, put a little comment of support. Every little comment helps. So Thanks for listening, and yeah, it's been great being on.